Hello and welcome, and thank you for joining me again at the lockdown micro allotment. And I'm just actually taking out my first batch of salad leaves, cut and come crop. That's really done its job. I've had about a month out of this actually, folks. So it's time for them to be replaced and resown. And we talk about gluts and famines. And it could well be a famine. In other words, I'm waiting for seeds to germinate. But what I've actually done, because I've got limited space, is I've sown some in micro pots, and I've actually got what I call a pick pot, so I can actually pick salad leaves while these are germinating. The radishes are done as well. They were absolutely lovely and nutty in flavour, and there's nothing like picking your own veg. And again, I'll be sowing those in the next couple of days. And the beetroot are coming along really well. My lettuce have actually been battered by the weather, because we've been through some really bad weather conditions, extraordinary, biblical, I would say, weather conditions. So my tom thumb exposed outside have been quite battered and quite sodden. And I'll show you a little secret, because I actually sowed some underneath the brassicas, and those have been absolutely wonderful because they've been protected by cabbages and cauliflowers. And on that point, let's just have a little look at the brassica bed. And I've had to extend this and make this bigger because the brassica leaves just absolutely went crazy in the warm and the wet. I think this time of year is an extraordinary time to be growing your own veg, because it just puts on so much growth in such a short space of time. But there's my sprouts, folks, there's my cabbages, and I'll be starting to use my beer treatment on my cabbages. That'll be half a can of beer into a watering can, and then just give them a feed, and it helps them heart up. The cauliflowers are coming along really well, and right on the end I've got the calabrese as well, which are again just starting to push out flowers. So we'll have a lovely little crop, and underneath I've got some tom thumb lettuce, and they've been absolutely lovely because they've been shielded against the rain, and it's really good to intercrop in this way. So very, very pleased with my brassica bed. Moving on really quickly to my tomatoes, and again in the storm last week these were battered. We had golf ball sized hailstones here. I don't know whether you had that where you were, but that's certainly what we had to cope with here. And these got a little bit of damage, but they're fighting on. Now I'm going to give these, just to give them a boost, a little bit of nitrogen. Now, some weeks ago we made some nettle tea, didn't we? And here it is. Here's our nettle tea. And as I take the pot, the top off the bottle, it's going to smell to high heaven. But this is high in nitrogen. So what I want these to do at the moment is just to leaf up a little bit. And if you notice, I've watered them to begin with, and then I'm going to pop a little bit. Remember, the actual mix for this is 1 part nitrogen to 10 parts water. I'm trying not to spill this over me because I've got to go shopping later, and effectively I don't want to be smelling like nettles at the end of the day. So there it is. That's all we need in that can, and we pop it in there like that. As with all good scientists, we put the cap back on, and then we give that just a little bit of a stir with my mixing stick. Never feed before you've watered, so we're just going to give that rows down. Look, I'm just going to give them a really little a drink of nettle tea there. Wonderful stuff, and these should grow green through and come back really, really well. So don't need a lot at the end of the day, but just helps them along a little bit because it's fairly windy in this part of the garden. And like I say, they did take a little bit of a knockback, and they just need a little bit of a boost. So there you go, that's those watered and fed. And remember, keep them well watered, especially through dry times. Now the other thing you need to be aware of with your tomatoes is side shoots. And we don't want side shoots really, especially if you're growing them as cordons, because your tomatoes become really, really congested, and that's good for fungal disease, number one, but also not good for fruit production. So you want your tomatoes to concentrate on producing that growth that will actually produce your fruits at the end of the day. So side shoots need to come out, and we've got a few to do here, but I'll show you one. And there's a nice side shoot here, and they take a little bit of finding, don't they? But there's one, look, there's a side shoot. You can see it running right into the axle, of the stem there, and we just pinch that out. But as we're into recycling, you can actually use your solid shoots. If you've got a pot of cutting compost, we can actually just pop those into a pot of cutting compost. Drop it in there, look, at the end of the day. And effectively you've got new tomatoes. Now don't leave them in the sun for too long, because that one was done about a minute ago, look, and they've already started to go a little bit wilty. So get them under shade, give them a really good water, and effectively you've done your tomatoes. You've got more tomato plants for you to actually grow. So push them under the shade of the tomato plants. Now if you're anything like me, when you're working in your allotment space, you like to munch things. So I'm going to show you first munchable. Now my peas I've done exceedingly well with, and you can grow peas and eat peas in many different ways. First of all, there's pea shoots, so you can eat them that way, but you can eat them as munch too. So if you've got the really fine pods that are growing, the really early pods, you can pick them like that, and you can actually get in there. You can see the sunlight growing through a couple of these, so we let Charlotte get in there, and you can eat them like that, folks. And you can eat them raw, or you can boil them away. But the other munchable thing is, if I grab one of the fuller pods, there it is, look. And remember, the more you actually pick, the more they will actually come. Now if we open this pod, look at that, folks. I mean, that is absolutely beautiful, and probably should have been left a day or two, but here we go. I'm going to feed my face. So I'm really going to, oh, these are so sweet, absolutely gorgeous. And if you've got children and they pick off the pod and they eat these, oh, you've got them there for life. It's alive. Okay, so do munchables. Second munchable really is the second munchable. If we go down here, look at my strawberries, and I only popped a couple in, but this is the actual value of straw under strawberries. All that wet weather, folks, all that rain, straw lifts it off the ground. It stops them from being rotting, and it stops them from being attacked by slugs. These are beautiful, look, they've not been touched at all. And look at that actual strawberry there, and look at that one there. So I just can't resist this. So here we go, we're going to actually have a look at that, beautiful. Oh, and that is, there's my second munchable. So we've got my strawberries coming along, tomatoes are working well, the brassica bed is working well, my peas, which I can munch. And remember, pick your peas from the bottom end upwards, okay, and the more you pick, the more they will actually produce pods. So we're going to move round and have a look at my carrots. So as we work around to the bed, the carrots are doing really well. Don't forget, there are interlopers, look. So we've got some weed that still needs to come out and be pulled out. But again, at this stage, carrots can actually be thinned through. So, and again, it's munchable. So if you just find a carrot and find the base of it, okay, and then just give that a really good tug from the ground upwards, then you find these little baby carrots that actually long fine stems, but those are munchable, so you can actually munch on those and eat them, let alone the tops. Absolutely gorgeous. But you can see these are starting to develop well, but do need to be thinned out, folks, so you can actually bite on those. And guess what, the taste of carrots, what more would you want? My potatoes done fantastically well. Been so pleased with these, and now they're flowered and they're just finishing flowering. So I've got about 10 days before we start to harvest the potatoes, both in the bed, and remember, that's a bed that's 1.4 meters long by 1 meter wide. So we're going to have some wonderful potatoes out of that bed. And the ones in pots as well are just behind me, and they're doing terrifically well. And again, wait for the flowers to finish, and then it's about 10 days afterwards, roughly 100 days until you've actually put them in the ground, that they then need to be harvested. And I'll be sharing that with you guys fairly shortly. Now, to finish off with a couple of things. I like to grow onions in pots, and the onions in the bed are doing fantastically well. But have a look at my onions in the pots. Look, these are just starting to bulk up. So I did these late on. So just pull out any of the other onions that are causing a little bit of congestion, so that the bigger onions, and there you go, bigger onions can actually start to develop. So I will actually pull out just 3 or 4 of the smaller onions, which we can use as a spring type onion, and leave the bigger onions in the pot. There you go, they're quite greasy, just to develop. So I'll have 5 or 6 bigger onions that we can actually use for our summer burgers, middle of July, early August. And then finally, something I've always wanted to grow but never had the time to grow is blueberries. And I finally bought myself a blueberry during lockdown, and look, we've got blueberries, look. So I hope you can see these. We've got blueberries there, and the secret to growing blueberries is to actually keep that compost really well acidic. And I've got my homemade tea, so 30 tea bags, remember, in a bucket, and then leave it for 3 weeks. Stir once every week, and you've got an acid liquid feed. You don't need to dilute it down, you can just pour that straight on. And we've got about 20 bottles of this, folks. So all I'm going to do with that is I'm just going to give it a really good drink with acid feed. And I've done this once a week, and that really is the secret for blueberries. So there you go. You're now up to date with the lockdown allotment. We've got lots of harvesting to do. Once my potatoes are out, I'm going to put sweet corn in and courgettes. My courgettes just cannot wait to get into that bed. And we'll be growing some other things for winter as well. And I've made a few decisions as to carry this on, because as we come out of lockdown, I don't just want to leave this as it is. I want to actually move it forward and develop it for next year. So once again, thank you very much for watching my channel. I hope you get lots of advice from the channel. Do send me comments, do subscribe. Remember, it's free to subscribe, and there's going to be plenty more advice about growing your veg during July, August and September to come. So most of all, folks, inspire other people to garden, but keep gardening yourself, and I will speak to you very soon in the next video along.